Hello, I'm Alara Vance. Have you ever gazed into your sister's eyes, your own face a canvas of crimson, your shoulder screaming, wrenched from its socket, only to hear her whisper, "You should have signed the mortgage"? That was me. On the frigid concrete floor of my parents' garage, the metallic tang of iron coating my tongue, my vision a blurry kaleidoscope, all because I dared to refuse being their guarantor. I can still feel the brutal sting of my father's hand across my cheek, hear the sharp crack of my body slamming against the wall, the violent gasp as the air was punched from my lungs. My knees buckled, my palms slipped, slick with my own blood. Yet I clawed my way out of that suffocating space, across the frost-bitten yard, up the creaking porch steps to my mother's door. I pounded, sobbing, begging her for help. What happened next? That's a memory etched into my very soul. Even the police were horrified. 2 weeks before that brutal night, Serafina called me, out of the blue. Her voice, a predator's purr I knew too well, dripped with artificial honey, the kind she reserved for when she wanted something. "Hey, Alara," she chirped. "We're having a little dinner at Mom and Dad's this Friday. Just us, cozy. Dad's even cooking." I hesitated. It wasn't unusual for Serafina to invite me to what always turned into a carefully orchestrated ambush, but she pressed, her tone laced with a manufactured sentimentality. "It's been too long, and Dad really misses you." Against every warning bell clanging in my head, I agreed. When I arrived, the house smelled faintly of roasted chicken, yes, but also a sharp, clinical lemon cleaner. The dining room table, a battlefield disguised, was set with Mom's best china, the kind usually reserved for Christmas or when she needed to impress someone important. Serafina greeted me at the door with an overly tight hug, her sickly sweet perfume clinging to my hair. "You look tired," she remarked, her eyes too bright. Behind her, my father, Marcus Vance, sat at the head of the table, shoulders squared, a tumbler of amber liquor in his hand. His expression was a stone wall. I hung my coat, the house's oppressive silence already weighing on me, and joined them, forcing a polite smile. Dinner began pleasantly enough, a thin veneer of normalcy. Mom ladled soup into our bowls, her movements unnaturally precise. Serafina chattered about her endless renovations. Gideon, her husband, droned on about some business deal I knew was already crumbling. Then the performance ended. Dad reached under his chair, his movements deliberate, and slid a thick manila envelope across the polished mahogany toward me. "Open it," he commanded. I froze. "What's this?" Serafina leaned in, elbows on the table, her smile a brittle thing. "We're closing on the house soon, but the bank's being ridiculous. They just need a little extra assurance." "Assurance," I repeated, the word tasting like ash. Dad nodded, his gaze unwavering. "Your name on the mortgage, just as a guarantor. It's no big deal, Alara." The words hit me like a slow, agonizing punch. I worked in finance. I knew exactly what lurked inside that envelope: balloon payments, variable interest rates, predatory clauses that could financially sink me if they defaulted. "You've been denied before, haven't you?" I asked quietly, my voice barely a whisper. Serafina's smile faltered, a crack in her perfect facade. "Temporary credit issues. Freelance income looks bad on paper, you know." Dad's eyes hardened, turning into chips of ice. "That's why we need you. You've always been the responsible one." It wasn't a compliment, it was a cold, hard command. I set my spoon down, the clink echoing in the strained silence. "I can't just sign something like this. Not if anything goes wrong." "Nothing will go wrong," Serafina cut in, her voice rising. "You think we'd let that happen to you? We're family." The word family hung heavy between us, a suffocating net they kept casting, hoping I'd tangle myself in its familiar threads. I didn't take the bait. I'll think about it, I said, forcing a calm I didn't feel. Dad's jaw tightened, but he didn't push. Not then. I finished my soup, the taste lost, the envelope still sitting between us like a loaded weapon. The next morning, I found myself at Wren's kitchen table, cradling a mug of coffee I hadn't touched. She'd been my best friend since college, the one person who could read my face like an open book. They want you to do what? She asked, folding her arms, her gaze sharp. I stared into the steam curling from my mug. Co-sign the mortgage. Just to get them through closing. Even to my own ears, it sounded like I was defending them. Wren's eyes narrowed. Alara, no. If you sign that, you'll be on the hook for every cent when they can't pay. And trust me, they won't pay. They're my family, I said quietly, the old loyalty a dull ache in my chest. No, she countered, leaning forward, her voice firm. They're counting on you thinking that way. You've always been the one who shows up. That's why they keep asking, because you're predictable. The words stung, mostly because they were a brutal truth. I tried to smile, to wave it off, but her unwavering gaze pinned me in place. Do you remember the credit card mess 3 years ago when they accidentally used your account for Gideon's business expenses and you paid it off because you didn't want mom and dad to be embarrassed? My throat tightened. That was different, she said. It's never different, Wren said flatly. It's the same story over and over. They create the mess, you clean it up. I looked away, my eyes tracing the familiar pattern of her kitchen tiles. The truth was a bitter pill. I just don't want to lose them, I whispered, the admission tearing through me. Wren's voice softened, but her message held firm. You need to ask yourself what you're losing by keeping them. Her words sank into me like cold water. She reached across the table, resting her hand on mine. Alara, you have to draw a line somewhere because if you don't, there's no limit to how far they'll push. I nodded, but I didn't promise anything. When I left her house, the winter air bit at my cheeks. In my car, the scent of coffee clung to my sweater, a potent reminder of her warning. I wanted to believe she was overreacting, but deep down, I knew she wasn't. 2 nights later, I walked into my parents' dining room and knew immediately this wasn't just a family meal. The table was set like something out of a glossy magazine. Mom's silverware polished to a mirror shine, her lace tablecloth perfectly pressed. A magnificent roast chicken sat in the center, its skin crisp and golden. Serafina was already sat beside Gideon, both of them radiating that smug, almost homeowner's energy. Dad sat at the head of the table, knife and fork resting neatly on either side of his plate like a general surveying his troops. Mom moved between the kitchen and dining room, smiling the way she did when company was over, except the only company tonight was me. Ilara, Mom said, brushing a non existent crumb from my shoulder, her smile too wide. You're just on time. It's 6 o'clock exactly, I replied, slipping into the chair they clearly reserved for me, right between Serafina and Dad. Dinner began with polite small talk, Serafina's latest fabric swatches, Gideon's big break in business, Mom's new church committee. But as soon as the plates were half empty, Dad leaned back, swirling the ice in his glass. So, he said, fixing me with that measured gaze I'd known my whole life, Serafina tells me you haven't signed yet. I set my fork down. I'm still considering it. Gideon chuckled under his breath. Considering it's just a signature, Alara, you don't even have your own family to worry about. Why not help your sister start hers? His words landed like a sharp slap, though his tone stayed light, almost teasing. Mom nodded in agreement, as if Gideon's cruel point was entirely reasonable. Families help each other, she chimed in, smiling sweetly. I swallowed the sharp reply building in my throat. It's a big financial commitment. I just want to be careful. Dad's smile thinned, a dangerous flicker in his eyes. Careful or stingy? Serafina let out a quiet, dismissive laugh, shaking her head as if I'd just uttered something utterly ridiculous. The air thickened. Forks scraped against plates like tiny knives. My hands tightened in my lap. You've always thought you were better than the rest of us, Dad said, his voice low now, a dangerous warning. You work with numbers, so you think you see every angle, but life isn't a spreadsheet. I'm not better than anyone, I said, evenly, meeting his gaze. I just know what's at stake if things go wrong. His jaw tightened, but he didn't say anything more.
We finished dinner in strained silence. I kept my eyes on my plate, counting the minutes until I could escape. As I stood to take my coat, Dad's voice followed me. You'll come by later this week. We'll talk privately. It wasn't a request. And despite every instinct screaming at me to say no, I heard myself answer, fine. Dad called me that Friday afternoon. No hello, no small talk. Swing by the house after work. We need to settle this. Every muscle in my body screamed to refuse, but years of conditioning, of showing up when he demanded it, made my mouth say, all right. By the time I pulled into their driveway, the winter sun had sunk behind the trees, leaving the yard in a bruised gray light. The garage door was open just enough for me to duck under. The air inside was sharp with the smell of motor oil and cold metal. Dad stood near his workbench, a half-empty tumbler in hand. Serafina leaned against the doorway that led into the house, her arms crossed, a faint, chilling smirk tugging at her lips. Ilara, Dad said, gesturing toward the stool across from him. Sit. I stayed standing. You wanted to talk? He set the glass down with a clink that reverberated in the concrete space. This is ridiculous. You're making your sister's life harder over nothing. One signature, Serafina purred. That's all. It's not nothing, I said quietly, my voice surprisingly steady. It's a legally binding contract that could ruin me. Serafina's laugh was soft, almost pitying. You're being dramatic. Dad took a step forward, his heavy boots loud against the floor. I'm your father. I've provided for you your whole life. The least you can do is step up when I ask. I'm not saying no to hurt you, I said, a desperate plea in my voice. I'm saying no because it's dangerous. His face hardened. Dangerous? What's dangerous is a daughter who turns her back on her family. The air seemed to press in around me. I took a step back, my shoulder brushing the cold, unforgiving steel of the garage wall. Dad's voice dropped into that low, dangerous register I'd feared since I was a child. You think you're too good for us? Sitting in your fancy office, acting like you're above the people who made you? That's not what this is. He moved fast. One violent shove, and my back slammed into the wall. Pain shot through my shoulder, white hot, stealing my breath. Dad, stop! The punch came so quickly, I barely saw it. A flash of his arm, the sharp crack across my cheekbone, the immediate metallic taste of iron flooding my mouth. I crumpled, my knees hitting the concrete hard. My hand slipped in something warm. Blood, I realized, dripping from my nose. Serafina didn't move to help. She just tilted her head, watching me, and said, almost gently, You should have signed the mortgage. Her words cut deeper than the physical blow. I tried to push myself up, but the pain in my shoulder was blinding now, a deep, nauseating throb. Dad stood over me, chest heaving. You're going to regret this. I met his eyes, refusing to look away, refusing to give him the satisfaction. I already do. For a second, I thought he might hit me again. Instead, he turned and walked toward the doorway, brushing past Serafina without a glance. Serafina crouched down, her cloying perfume thick in the air. You're making a mistake you can't take back, Ilara. Then she stood, following him inside, the door shutting with a final heavy click. The garage was suddenly silent except for my ragged breathing. I don't know how long I lay there, cheek pressed to the cold floor, the world narrowing to the deafening thrum of my heartbeat in my ears. My fingers were numb, my vision blurry. Finally, I forced myself to move. Every shift sent knives of pain through my shoulder, but I managed to crawl toward the open garage door, toward the sliver of bruised light. The night air hit me like ice, stinging my split lip. I made it across the driveway, through the brittle, frozen grass of the yard, and up the steps to the front porch. My hand shook as I pounded on the door. "Mom, it's me!" My voice cracked, raw with pain and desperation. "Please, I need help." Inside, I heard muffled voices. My mother's, low and uncertain, and my father's, firm and unyielding. "Please, Mom," I sobbed, my forehead resting against the cold doorframe. "I'm hurt. I just need you to open the door." The voices stopped. The house went utterly still. I knocked again, weaker this time. "Don't leave me out here." Nothing. My legs gave out, and I sank onto the welcome mat, the one that read, "Family First" in cheerful cursive. Blood from my lips spotted the fabric. Somewhere down the street, a dog barked. Snow began to drift in the bitter air, dusting my hair, melting against my hot skin. That was how Mrs. Albright found me, crumpled on the porch, half conscious, bleeding. "Oh my God, Ilara, what happened?" She was already pulling out her phone. "Stay with me. I'm calling 911. The last thing I remembered before the wail of sirens was the slam of the front door, not opening to let me in, but shutting tighter, shutting me out for good. The sirens grew louder, their piercing cry filling the night, until blue and red lights flashed across the pristine snow. Two EMTs knelt beside me, their voices calm but urgent. "Ma'am, can you hear me? What happened?" My shoulder, I winced as one of them gently touched it. "Looks like it's dislocated," he said to his partner. "We'll stabilize it." They wrapped me in a thermal blanket, lifting me carefully onto a stretcher. The cold air bit at my cheeks, but I barely noticed. What I noticed was the house behind me, the dark windows, the closed curtains. Not once did my parents come out. Not dad, not mom. But my sister, oh, she'd been busy. Wynn's name popped up on my screen. "Before you see it somewhere else, I need to show you something." She sent me a link to Serafina's private Facebook post. Private, but not private enough. There I was, on the garage floor, face streaked with blood, eyes glazed with pain. The clip was short, grainy, and deliberately cropped. The caption read, "Please keep my sister in your prayers. She's been struggling and had an episode last night. We did everything we could to calm her down." An episode? My stomach turned. They'd keyed my pain, my assault, and twisted it into a performance, painting me as unstable, dangerous even. And knowing Serafina, she'd already fed that narrative to half the family, if not the entire neighborhood. I called Wynn. "She's making me look dangerous, like I did this to myself." She didn't mince words. "She's controlling the narrative, and you're letting her." "What am I supposed to do?" I asked, my voice cracking. "Go online and argue? That'll just make me look worse." Her voice was steady, unwavering. "No, you gather proof. This isn't family drama anymore, it's assault. And now it's defamation. Press charges." The thought made my chest tighten. My own father, my own sister. But then I thought about the rough blanket over my shoulders in the ambulance, the one the EMTs had given me because strangers cared more than my own blood. Maybe Wynn was right. That night, after Wynn's call, I sat at my kitchen table with my laptop open. The cursor blinked on a blank folder. I typed one word into the name field: evidence. For a long time, I just stared at it, my pulse thrumming in my ears. This was more than just saving files. It was crossing a line I'd never dared to cross with my family. The first thing I uploaded was the report from the hospital. Diagnosis: dislocated left shoulder, blunt force trauma to the face, split lip. Physician's note: injuries consistent with physical assault could not be self-inflicted. Then came the photographs. I'd taken them that morning, my hand shaking as I held the phone. Bruises blooming purple across my jaw, swelling under my eye, the angry red welt on my shoulder where Dad had grabbed me. I saved each one carefully, labeling them by date and time. Then I opened my messages. Every text from Serafina, every missed call, every group chat where either mom or she had subtly hinted I was unstable, it all went into the folder. Then I pulled up the Facebook video. Even cropped and edited, it was damning in its own way. Proof they had filmed me without consent while I was injured. Wynne came by with something that made my hands go cold. Footage from Mrs. Albright's security camera. The black and white video showed the garage from across the street. There was Dad, storming out, Serafina following close behind. Neither looked back. Moments later, I crawled into view, dragging my arm, blood visible even in the greeny image. Wynne set her phone down. This is enough to start. I swallowed hard. Start what? Holding them accountable. The idea felt impossible. I'd spent my whole life absorbing the blows, not just physical ones, to keep the family intact. Filing a case against them felt like shattering the last piece of that fragile image. I thought about Mom's voice behind the door, the choice she'd made to leave me out in the snow. I thought about Dad's fist. I thought about Serafina's chilling smile as she called me dramatic. And then I realized the family I was protecting didn't exist. Not for me. By midnight, the folder was filled. Medical records, photos of injuries, text messages, the Facebook video, Mrs. Albright's footage. I backed it all up to a flash drive and slipped it into my desk drawer. When I finally closed my laptop, the house was quiet. No ringing phone, no footsteps in the hall. Just me and the knowledge that the next move was mine. The thought scared me, but it also steadied me. For the first time, I wasn't cleaning up their mess. I was building my own case. The courtroom smelled faintly of paper and stale coffee. Sterile, detached from the raw, ugly mess that had brought us all here. Dad sat at the defendant's table in a crisp suit, his jaw clenched, eyes refusing to meet mine. Serafina was beside him, scrolling on her phone like this was a tedious errand, a minor inconvenience. Mom sat in the back row, hands folded in her lap, eyes fixed anywhere but on me. My attorney stood, holding up the flash drive like a sacred relic. Your Honor, this contains security footage from a neighbor's camera, corroborated medical records, and social media posts made by the defendants. The judge nodded. Proceed. The screen lit up with Mrs. Albright's video. The grainy black and white footage showed me crawling from the garage, arm limp, blood smeared across my face. Gasps rippled through the room. Then came the hospital report, the stark photographs of my injuries, the insidious Facebook post. Each piece landed like a hammer, shattering the false narrative Serafina had spun. When it was my turn to speak, my voice, to my own surprise, was steady. I didn't want to be here. I didn't want to stand in front of strangers and talk about what my own father did to me. But when your family closes the door on you, literally, you realize you have two choices: keep bleeding for them or stop. Dad glared at me, his face a mask of fury. But I didn't look away. My gaze held his, unwavering. I'm done bleeding, I said, the words ringing with a newfound conviction. The judge reviewed the evidence in silence before delivering the ruling. Dad was guilty of assault. Serafina guilty of defamation. A restraining order was granted. When it was over, I walked out into the crisp winter air. Mom didn't follow. Neither did Serafina. Wren was waiting by the courthouse steps, holding a paper cup of coffee. You did it. I let out a breath I felt like I'd been holding for years. Yeah, I said, a faint smile touching my lips. I did. For the first time, I realized that family wasn't the house you were born into. It was the door you chose to walk through. And for me, this was a new one.